Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Invest Power series today. Glad to be here and look, I think it's been months since COVID has hit Australia. And as you probably would have heard across the news, across all the updates, across pretty much every channel, that they're saying lending is getting harder and harder, in particular in the current environment, because lenders are a lot more conservative and they want to plan ahead due to potential uplift in terms of numbers on potential arrears and defaults, given the number of unemployment in Australia is reaching an all-time high. So that's why today I thought it's worthwhile for us to discuss a little bit about how I can help you or attribute a couple of tips on how you can get your application going through smoother. Okay. So my number one tip in terms of getting your application to fly through smoothly is to actually disclose all the information about your personal credit. So let's say, for example, you had some arrears beforehand. In other words, you're behind in terms of your repayments, or you had even what they call defaults. You didn't make repayments for 3 months or 6 months or even longer. If you have any kind of these circumstances or situation that has occurred to you, make sure you highlight that to your broker or the bank that you're applying with, okay? Because this is important information. Every time when you have an arrears or default, it actually puts a mark on your credit rating or credit report, okay? So when people pull up credit report, and as we brokers do, we pull up credit reports to actually go through them to see whether there's any red crosses, anything that we need to highlight, we need to clarify. It's better off for the customers to actually highlight this to us before we get the application to the lender. Because as you can imagine, if lenders finds out that it's not disclosed or uncovered beforehand, and usually the application is not going to fly because they're finding out after fact, whereas they expect that when during the submission that you would have been very upfront about what has happened previously, what did you do to mitigate it, so that therefore there's still a chance that they can approve the loan. And I can tell you that can be an easy make or break. Okay, so a lot of lenders will not accept defaults or even a couple months of arrears. It just comes down to their credit policy. So imagine that today you've got these arrears and you did not tell me about it, and then we submit the deal to the lender. I thought you had a clean credit history, but it turns out not to be. That's why the application will be declined. Okay, so that's one very important information. Make sure you disclose all your credit information, your credit histories, whatever that you think would actually have a negative impact on the application that you're about to do. I'll suggest you raise it with your broker just to make sure that can be factored in as part of the consideration. The other common one is actually undisclosed debt. So if you had like a personal loan or even just a credit card, actually it's pretty common. A lot of people actually forgot they applied credit cards before. It might be one of those that you applied for a few thousand points, frequent flyer points, and then you ended up not using it, and the card gets stashed away in your tray, never get touched again. Now, that card, even though it's not used, has actually had a record on your credit report. So when lenders pull out your credit report, they'll see, David, you've actually applied for a ANZ credit card back in November 2011 or something like that, which you haven't used for a long time. Now, what happened to that card? So that usually you want to actually make sure that you address that beforehand as well. It's not the end of the world, but most of the time, lenders don't like undisclosed debt. And as such, that's why you want to make sure that these undisclosed information are actually picked up prior to submission. Okay, so that's why it could also make a difference, because imagine a credit card with a limit of say $15,000. That's quite a significant impact to your borrowing capacity. And if you're looking at a very, very tight deal, that could easily be a servicing of say $400,000 versus $350,000. Okay, so on that note, that's why it's better off to make sure that you address all the information and you disclose all the information to your broker, so that we can consider all these facets in terms of your credit history, in terms of your serviceability, in order to pick the lender that actually suits you the most. Now, tip number 2, this might sound very, very common sense, but provide as much supporting information or documents as required from your broker, okay? Now, we're not asking information just for the sake of our information. We actually need to go through, a lot of people don't understand this, we actually need to go through all the back-end process, like to go through your pay slips. Just as an example, we verify your pay slips by looking at the actual pay and then compare it against what's actually being paid into your bank account. Okay, so we actually need to do verification, and it's full verification as brokers ourselves. We need to be convinced that you are being paid at the level you claim to be. Not just the pay slips, but also matching with the bank statements, making sure that it's there. And if there's any discrepancies, as you can imagine, there will be more questions that need to be asked. So think of it like, you as a customer, you need to actually prove to the broker as a first level guide. And look, we are here to help you. We are here to basically make sure that the information's all lined up so that bank can give you one tick and tick on the first go, okay? That's the first approval. That's what all the brokers want. And in order to do that, that's why we want to make sure all the information is lined up correctly. And we have done the verification ourselves. We believe that Joe Blobs is earning $120,000, and it's all evident in the pay slips as well as in their bank statement. That's when we submit, and we got a strong case to be able to have that discussion with the credit assessor as required. Okay, so that's why you'll notice that brokers are asking a lot more information nowadays. We're asking for a lot more supporting documents, maybe even 6 months of bank statements, 6 months of credit card statements. That's all very, very typical. And that's just for us to be able to complete our due diligence and our part of verification to say, yes, this is a deal that's going to fly. We've ticked off, we looked at all the facets and we've ticked everything off. We're confident that the application is going to fly. And then one other tip that I have for you is actually in relation to signing mortgage documents. Now, whether you are doing a refinance or a purchase, you will always come up with this mortgage document, which is like a A4, standard that's from Land Title's office. It will have mortgage on the top, okay? So disregard whether you're purchasing in any state, you will always see one of these mortgage documents. Now, things can get pretty tricky with these mortgage documents. I've had a few hiccups lately with them, as much as I've been very cautious about them. Now, number one, if you need to print them out. So some lenders have actually introduced electronic delivery. So in other words, they will email you the loan documents, okay? If they do that, then you've got the obligation to make sure it's printed in the right scale. Now, most of the brokers will be printing it for you. However, if you're in a different state and your broker cannot actually deliver the mortgage document to you, then you actually need to print these out, and you might want to ensure that you printed exactly to the requirement that the Land Title's office need. Okay, so check with your broker if you need some guidance on this, but usually the bottom of the page, it's got the page numbers, it needs to be about 1 centimeter from the bottom of the A4 page. Okay, so that usually is an indicator. In my scenario, unfortunately, I had a client who followed the rule from what the lenders had gave them, printed out the document, but the footer got cut off. Okay, so even though, because every computer setting is different, even though they follow the instruction to a T, the footer still got cut off, and therefore, the mortgage document got rejected, and therefore he had to redo it again. And as you can imagine, when it gets very, very close to settlement, it's got a lot of stress, putting a lot of unnecessary stress on the buyer to be able to complete this. Okay, so that's why you want to make sure that for these mortgage documents, get them, if you are to print them, make sure that you check the requirements, get them printed out correctly. And the other one is witness requirement. That's another common one. So for mortgage witness, different states have different type of requirements. One of the common thing is, for example, New South Wales and Victoria, anyone over 18 years old and is not part of the mortgage or not part of the borrower can actually sign as a witness. So if you go into a branch today, get a staff to actually help you sign, that is okay. However, if you are purchasing a Queensland property, for example, Queensland Mortgage have specific witness requirements. They will require either a JP, a Justice of Peace, or a solicitor or a lawyer, as an example. Okay, so in this case, you cannot expect that the bank staff can actually sign that as a witness for you, because again, that's going to get hit back and you're going to have to redo it again. So when you sign a mortgage document, make sure you read through all the instructions, make sure you understand the witness requirement, and therefore that will minimize the amount of hitbacks that you actually had to do and you had to redo things again. And I can tell you, when a settlement day is very, very near for purchase, you will want to get these right in one go. Okay, so there's a few tips for all of you in terms of how you can go for a smoother process. I hope it helps, mate. If you got any questions about what I covered today, feel free to drop me an email at david@lempower.com.au. Otherwise, I'll see you guys again in that episode of Invest Power series.